So one day I ran outside and saw a watermelon, so I ran to it. I picked it up and then ran it back to my house to open it up the only way I knew how, with rubber bands. I put some rubber bands on it and then I got a sheet for when it breaks. And then I continued placing rubber bands on it with the help of my brother, and it was starting to actually work. I kept doing it, and then my brother drew a face on it. Henry! And then we just kept going until eventually we ran out of good rubber bands. So I was left with no choice but to run out in the rain, get in my car, and drive to Walmart. I got there, got my rubber bands, and then headed back home to get back to placing them. And eventually I could even see the indentation in the watermelon. And then I actually predicted it.
It's gonna bust.
When?
Any second.
Oh, God.
I just know it.
Instant replay. And it left this water rubber bands, like for me to turn it into a rubber band ball, part 2. Part 2, putting rubber bands on a watermelon. So it exploded and left us with this water rubber bands. So I decided to turn it into a rubber band ball with all the leftover rubber bands. I began by making the wad a lot neater, and I discovered this.
There's watermelon inside this.
So I did my best to get it out and then kept making it neater, and then eventually started placing actual rubber bands on it. And after a while, I took a break to go shoot some hoops with it. And let's just say it's not a basketball, and I ended up breaking my backboard more than it was already. And then I waited till the next day at like 2 in the morning to start trying to place more rubber bands on it. I finished my pile and started placing another bag, and eventually I was down to the last one. And to be honest, it was a lot of time for very little difference, but I got another bag anyway and started placing them. I finished it up and I had a ball, I guess. Let me know if I should even keep doing this. Part 3 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this water rubber bands. So I turned it into this actual rubber band ball, and now we're here and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. I got some rubber bands and then went home and emptied them out and opened up a bag. And got busy. But after a little bit I left and then came back the next day. And finished off the pile. And then I dumped out 2 more bags and started placing them. But I got bored and ended up leaving and coming back again the next day to finish it all off. I placed rubber bands forever, and then I went outside to test it out on my broken hoop. Yeah, it was hard to play with, but it bounced really high. Here's it next to a basketball. Yeah. After that, I went back inside to finish off the pile, and then I dumped out another 2 bags and started placing rubber bands for what felt like an eternity. And I was finally down to the last bag. I put them all on, and I was done. And it's pretty big, but it's going to take like 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going. Part 4 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this water rubber bands, and I've been adding a lot of rubber bands to it. And I said it would take 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going, and it got 4 million. So I went to Walmart, got more rubber bands, and then left, went home, set them down, and opened them up. And then the next day, I got on that rubber band grind, placing the entire pile on the ball. And when I was done, I left and came back again later to place another bag on. And once I finished that ball, it was pretty big, like the size of my head. I weighed it, and it weighed 5 pounds. And it also bounced pretty high, and made a decent basketball for my broken hoop. And after that, my brother wanted to play some bands, so I let him. But he gave up, and I ended up having to finish his pile off. And after that, I only had 1 more big pile left, so I dumped it all out and started placing them. I finished it up and then started on the bag of thicker rubber bands. And now I'm out. This sucked a lot, and since the last post got like 4 million likes, it's going to take like 5 million likes now for me to keep going. Part 5 of making a giant rubber band ball. So I've been making this rubber band ball, and I ran out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. Got a bunch more rubber bands, and then I went home, dumped 2 bags out, put some gloves on so I didn't break my skin again, and started placing the bands. And then left and came back the next day to finish off the pile. It looked pretty good so far, and then I forgot to video placing a whole nother bag. But it looks like this, and then I dumped out all the colored rubber bands and started placing them all on the rubber band ball. And I was done, and it was almost the size of my head and weighed 8.2 pounds. And bounced pretty high. And also made a decent basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 8.2 pounds, but I want it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, then emptied out 2 bags of colored rubber bands, and got busy placing the entire pile. And after I finished the colored rubber bands, I dumped out 3 bags of normal rubber bands and placed that. I placed a bunch, but then left and came back the next day to place some more. It got tiring, and I placed a lot of rubber bands, so I left, took another break, and came back and started on it again. I was sure to place the whole bag this time, but I got too tired and had to leave and come back again the next day to finish it off. So that's what I did, and I finished it up. And it was done. It weighed 10 pounds, was bigger than my head, and bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going. Part 7 of making a rubber band ball. So I've been making this ball, and it's pretty giant now and weighs 10 pounds. But I wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put my gloves on, and first finished off the pile of normal rubber bands that was already on the table. And once I was done with that, I dumped out all the bags of colored rubber bands and began placing them. I did this for quite a while, and the ball was finished, and it was huge. And it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is almost the size of a basketball. And it also bounces pretty high. And I also shot it in the hoop. And now I'm officially finished with it. It looks pretty cool. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is the size of a basketball. And I was going to stop, but everyone wanted me to keep going, so I went to Walmart, got some more bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, and got back at it. I started by placing the pile of colored rubber bands because it's easier to place, and once I was done with that, I weighed it, and it was 12.9 pounds and still bounced pretty high and made a good basketball. Then I went to Walmart to get more colored rubber bands, but they were out, so I just got the normal ones and went home, dumped that out, and placed that entire pile. I finished it off, and it was now 13.4 pounds and still the size of a basketball and still bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going and just see how big I can make it. Rubber band ball part 9. So a lot of people don't know that it started when this watermelon exploded and left me with this wad of rubber bands. And ever since then I've just been adding on to it, and this is the entire compilation up until now. And I needed more colored rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, but they were out. So I got gas and went to a different Walmart. But they were out too, so I went to another one and they finally had some. Then I went home, dumped out a bag, and then got busy placing the entire pile of rubber bands until I was done. And then I left and came back later. I dumped out the colored rubber bands and placed that entire pile. Then I found some more rubber bands in the floor, placed those, and then placed a bag of thicker rubber bands that I also found in the floor. And I was done. It now weighs 14.7 pounds, is the size of my head, and bounces pretty high. And it's also bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it's pretty big now, but everyone wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart to get more bands, but they were out, so I went to a different Walmart and got some. Then went home, set down a pile of bands, and got busy placing the entire thing until it was done. And then I dumped out a few more bags, and first placed the bag of smaller rubber bands, and then the bags of thicker rubber bands until I was done with that. And it now weighs nearly 16 pounds. And still bounces pretty high, but it's hard to catch now. And it makes a decent basketball. Like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and people seem to never want me to stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, and then went home to start placing them. I dumped out the little bags first and began placing all of those until I was done. Which took a while. Then I left and came back later to place all of the colored rubber bands, which took even longer, but now it looks pretty. I left again and came back to place the last bag of thicker rubber bands, and it was finally done. And it now weighs 17.5 pounds, is bigger than my head, and is pretty hard to catch when you bounce it. And now it's noticeably bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to continue this ball. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and to be honest, at this point I'll probably never stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then left, went home, dumped out all the colored rubber bands, and began placing them. Until I was done with the entire pile, which took a while. But I did it, then took a break and came back later to start on the pile of normal rubber bands. And I placed that entire pile covering all the colored rubber bands. So sad. Then took another break, came back and dumped out all the thicker rubber bands and began placing them until I was out. And the ball now weighs 19.2 pounds and is a lot harder to throw and way harder to make a basket with. Yeah, it's pretty big, so like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it's getting pretty huge, and I'm probably not stopping. So I went to Walmart, got all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home, dumped out the bag of normal rubber bands, and placed that entire pile, which was kind of hard because of how big the rubber band ball is now. Then I took a couple days off and came back to place all 8 bags of colored rubber bands, which took a while, a long while. But eventually I finished, and it's huge now. It weighs 21.6 pounds and is a lot harder to throw and catch than it used to be, and almost impossible to make a basket with, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this rubber band ball for way longer than I thought I'd be, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and they were out of rubber bands, so I left and came back a few days later and they had some. I went home, dumped them all out into a pile, and started placing them. And it's honestly just so satisfying to watch the pile go down. And when I was done, I left and came back later with a new bag that I ordered on Amazon. And the band seemed good, so I placed the entire pile until I was done. And it now weighs 23.6 pounds, is way bigger than my head, and it's really hard to throw, and even harder to make a basket with. But I made one. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep adding rubber bands every time Walmart restocks. So I went there, got a few more bags of colored rubber bands, then went home and started with the 2 bags I ordered on Amazon. I placed the entire pile until you couldn't see a colored rubber band in sight. And then I left and came back later to place the colored rubber bands I got at Walmart. And I placed it until I was done. It's huge and now weighs almost 26 pounds, is super hard to throw and really hard to catch, but I can still make a basket with it and even stand on it now. Well, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So as you probably know, I've been making this giant rubber band ball. And I needed more rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. But they were out of the ones I needed, so I went to a different Walmart and they had some. Then I went home, dumped them all out, and got busy. And sped up, this all just looks really cool. Anyway, I finished that pile and took a break and came back later to finish this bag I ordered. And sadly, it's a lot less colorful now. But I'm done, and it now weighs 28.3 pounds and bounces decently. And I also made a basket. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball for quite a while now, and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, and they had so many colored rubber bands. I got them and then went back to carry even more and then left. I went home and started with this pack I ordered, and I placed the entire pile. And done. And then I took a break and came back later with all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and got busy placing them for what felt like an eternity, because this is probably the biggest pile I've ever placed. And it's huge. It now weighs 30 pounds, is way bigger than my head, is pretty hard to throw, and almost impossible to make a basket with, and I can even stand on it. Like if you think I should keep going. So this is part 18 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and got like 9 packs of colored rubber bands, then left, went home, and dumped them all out into a giant pile, and got busy placing them. And I placed the entire pile, which took quite a while. And then I left and took a break and came back later with this bag. I dumped it out and placed that entire pile. And eventually I was done. And it weighs a lot. It's bigger than my head. It's pretty hard to make a basket with. I can stand on it and really hard to throw. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm back at it again with the rubber band ball, and I need more rubber bands again. So I went to Walmart and counted out like 12 packs of rubber bands in the floor, and then grabbed them all and went home. And I first started with the pack I ordered on Amazon to match the surface of the ball. And after I was done with that, I took a break and came back later to place all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and then began placing them for quite a while until I was done. And the scale said it weighed 39 pounds, so I double checked on another one and it said the same thing. It's really hard to throw and officially impossible to make a basket with now, but I can stand on it, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm now to part 20 of this, which is crazy, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home and dumped them all out into a pile. And then I got busy placing them until I was done with that pile. Then I got the 2 packs I ordered, dumped them all out into a pile, and began placing them until the ball was finished. And it now weighs an astounding 42 pounds. It is very hard to bounce now, and its basketball days are just over. But I am getting better at standing on it, so that's cool. Like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now on part 21 of this rubber band ball, and no one ever seems to want me to stop, so I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had. Then I went home and started out with the bag I ordered on Amazon, and I placed that entire pile. And then I took a break, as usual, and came back to place all the colored rubber bands. And I dumped them all out into a pile, and then placed it all, which took quite a while, but I finished, and it now weighs 45 pounds. Could probably take me out, and I broke my already broken basketball goal with it. But hey, I can stand on it, and like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 22 of this, and everyone just wants more, and more. So I went to Walmart and bought more. I bought all the packs of colored rubber bands I could carry, and then I went home and dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot. And then I got busy placing all the bands, which took so long I almost quit. But I didn't, and it's done and now weighs 48 pounds. And it's like 3 times the size of my head and can even crush a can of Flex Seal. Wow. And I'm also able to fully balance on it now, like if I should keep on going. So it's now part 23, and I'm really starting to think it's never going to end. But that's okay. I went to Walmart and, bought a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them all out into a nice pile. And then I started placing them, and it's to the point now where the bands sometimes break and it hurts. I took a break, as usual, and came back to place this bag I ordered on Amazon. And I placed it, and the ball now weighs over 51 pounds. Could probably kill a bear, and is no longer a good basketball. More like a chair. Here's it next to a basketball. And here's my trick chat. Ooh. Like if I should keep on going. So it's now to part 24 of making this rubber band ball, and I went to Walmart and got more colored rubber bands. I got a bunch and then went home and started out with this new pack I ordered on Amazon. They were pretty cool and more stretchy than the normal colored rubber bands. I placed that entire pile and then took a break and came back to place all these other colored rubber bands. I dumped them out into a pile and then placed the entire thing until I was done. And I also ordered this little rubber band ball just for fun to look at and stuff. The big one now weighs 55 pounds and is pretty hard to get down the stairs. And compared to the little one, they bounce similar, but I can stand on this one and not on this one. And I can toss this one, but not this one. Like if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now to part 25 of this giant rubber band ball, and everyone just wants more and more and more. So I ordered these new rubber bands on Amazon, and they were way too small. So I got sad, and then I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of colored rubber bands and then went home. Then I, dumped them out into a pile and started placing them, which took longer than usual for some reason. But I finished, then took a break and came back later to place these other colored rubber bands I ordered. I placed that entire pile, and the ball kind of looks like Spider-Man now, and weighs 57 pounds. I took it downstairs and outside, then threw it and sat on it, and it's also way bigger than my head, and I can stand on it. So, if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 26 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm gonna keep on going. I ordered these bigger rubber bands on Amazon, and they weren't as small as the last ones, but they were still really hard to stretch around the ball. And I dumped them all out into a pile and placed it, and it was harder to place than any other pile I've ever placed. And it was exhausting, so I left and came back the next day to place 2 more packs of them. And I placed that pile, and it now weighs 61 pounds. I took it downstairs and compared it to this ball, then threw it, and then stood on it, kinda. More like sat on it. Anyway, if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 27 of my rubber band ball, and I need more bands, so I ordered these big rubber bands and started placing them. And these bands are really hard to place, so this was really exhausting. So I took a break and then came back later to place these colored rubber bands and make it look good. I placed the entire pile, and it now weighs 65 pounds. I let it roll out to the cul-de-sac, picked it up, threw it down, then tried to stand on it, then threw it again, and then my brother tried to stand on it. And if you want me to keep on going. So it's now to part 28 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I ordered more rubber bands. I dumped them out and placed them. And when I was finished with that, I got out these garbage bag rubber bands that I ordered that are also pretty colorful. And then I placed another pile of those ones. And it now weighs 68 pounds. I took it downstairs, out to the yard, into the cul-de-sac, and look at it next to a basketball. Ordinary basketball and hoop, rubber band ball and hoop. Tossing basketball, tossing band ball. But I can stand on this one, if you want me to keep on going. So it's now part 29 of this rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to keep going. I ordered another box of these thick rubber bands and put the whole pile on my ball. I then took a break and came back later to place all these colored rubber bands that are also supposed to be garbage bag rubber bands. I placed the entire pile, and it was done. And it's now 72 pounds. I rolled it downstairs, outside, and into the cul-de-sac. Here it is in comparison to my head, and here's me trying to throw it. And look, the basketball hoop fell over. But I can stand on it. And if you want me to keep on going. So I've been making this rubber band ball for a long time, and it's now part 30. And I ordered another pack of these big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And after I was done with that, I got the pile of even more of these big colored rubber bands than I did last time. And when I was done with that, the ball was looking pretty good at 76 pounds. I took it out to the street, picked it up, and threw it the best I could, and then tried again. And I ended up just laying on it and then standing on it. So, if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now to part 31 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I got another package. I dumped out this pack of pretty big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And then, I did last time, got a bunch of these colored garbage bag rubber bands and placed them all. And these ones placed pretty good. I finished, and the ball now weighs 81 pounds. I took it downstairs and out to the cul-de-sac, where I compared it to my head, and then got up and tried to throw it. And then I tried to throw it behind me, and then stood on it. And even tried to ramp it, but just broke the ramp. So, if you want me to keep going, and comment any ideas you have for it. So now to part 32 of this rubber band ball, and I'm probably never stopping, honestly. I bought another one of these packages, put it in a pile, and placed it. And then I got out all the colored rubber bands that are actually meant for garbage cans. And I placed that entire pile as well, and the ball now weighs 84 pounds. And I took it out to the street, and because my wrist is kind of hurt, I couldn't really pick it up, but here's it next to a basketball, and then we walked off together in the sunset, if I should keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 33 of this giant rubber band ball, which is insane. And I got another box. I placed this entire pile of rubber bands, which wasn't that bad, and then dumped out all these colored garbage bag rubber bands. I had them in a nice pile, and then placed them all one by one until I was out. And it now weighs over 90 pounds. I took it out to the cul-de-sac and tried the best I could to pick it up and throw it. And then I stood on it, and this time I actually didn't fall off it. I jumped, and here it is next to my head, and here it is rolling. If you want me to keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 34 of this giant rubber band ball. And it's getting kind of redundant, but I'm going to try to keep it interesting. I ordered these bands, placed them on, you know. Then I got the other pile, which is these colored rubber bands that I actually have to untie first and then place them on the ball. And after placing this entire pile, it now weighs almost 95 pounds. I struggled to make it out to the cul-de-sac. And it's so heavy it even picked up grass. Then I picked it up and threw it. And look at it in freeze frame. Look how big it is. It's so big, there's really not much you can even do with it. Here's it next to a basketball. Here's it crushing one and then falling off. And then me trying to stand on it, but failing and crushing the basketball goal. So, like if I should keep on going or comment what I should do. So it's now part 35 of my giant rubber band ball, and I decided to change up the scenery a little bit. I dumped out a whole box of rubber bands of different kinds. I started by dumping these colored garbage bag rubber bands into a pile and putting these gloves on so I don't hurt my fingers, and putting all the rubber bands on, and this happened. Right into my eye socket. And it hurt, but I kept on going because the rubber band ball wasn't going to make itself. I finished off all these colored ones and then dumped out these purple ones that I ended up not using because they were kind of trash. I got out these ones instead and placed the entire pile. And I was done and exhausted. The ball is almost 100 pounds now, and it's a pretty big struggle to get downstairs. Took it out to the street and barely picked it up. Yeah, it's getting pretty hard to throw now, so I just sit on it and stand on it. Like if you want me to keep on going to 100. So I'm now all the way to part 36 of this giant rubber band ball. And let me know if you want to stop, but for now I'm going to keep going. So I got this new pack and, you know, placed that entire pile on the ball, which was pretty exhausting. So I took a break, then came back later with all these colored rubber bands that I dumped into a pile and placed on the rubber band ball. And I was done. And it might have broke the scale because it reads 102 and 103. So I don't know. Then I took it downstairs struggling. I rolled it off into the yard and into the road. And just look at this ball in comparison to my head. It's massive, and it's getting pretty hard to lift and throw. And like if you want me to keep going or just cut it in half. So I'm now to part 37 of this giant rubber band ball. And it's getting pretty giant, but everyone still wants it to be bigger. So I ordered more rubber bands, dumped them into a pile, and started placing. And then this happened because it's getting hard to place them. But I kept on going, finishing the pile, and then I took a break and went outside to play with the ball in the snow. And there wasn't much snow, but I made as big a snowball as I could, set it on the rubber band ball, and then crushed it. And then I came back to place another pile. I dumped it out, and then I placed it a little bit differently this time. I just threw all the bands on the ball. Bam. Magic. And the ball actually broke the scale, and the scale won't read anymore. So I don't know how much it weighs, but I took it out of the cul-de-sac, and it's just pretty heavy. So, like if you want me to keep on. So this is rubber band ball part 38, and this ball is getting giant, and I'm going to keep going. Got a bunch more bands, you know, and I tested out these new bands that didn't end up working. So I just ended up going back to these colored rubber bands, and the camera cut out, and I lost all that footage of me putting on. So here's me putting on the last one, and then taking it downstairs. And the ball now weighs 109 pounds. I took it outside, and it ran into a bush. And then I set it on top of this swing and started swinging it. And it was pretty cool, and I tried to knock it off, but couldn't. The most it did was that. And then I just got on it and kicked it off. And it's so heavy I can barely pick it up anymore. Let me know if you want me to keep going. So I'm to part 39 of this giant rubber band ball, and I can't find any other type of rubber bands except these ones to place on it. So let me know if you have any other options, but for now I'm going to keep on placing these. And I placed the entire pile of color rubber bands until I was all out. And then I took the ball outside to mess around with it, and it was snowing, so I just laid on the ball and caught the snow. And I can't even lift it over my head anymore because it weighs like 110 pounds. And then here's me breaking a basketball goal with it. And here it is next to a basketball, and then me standing on it, and let me know if I should keep on doing this. So I'm now to part 40 of my giant rubber band ball, and I wanted to walk you guys through the entire process. I take it upstairs and into this room where I sit down and place rubber bands. I'm actually running out of the type of rubber bands I can place because these ones are just too tiny and break on me. And these ones are just getting old and I have to untangle them every single time. But no worries, I found this random custom rubber band site on the internet and called them up.
Yo, I need your 15-inch rubber bands. I'll place an order for like 25 pounds.
And just like that, $200 worth of rubber bands was on the way. But for now, I'm going to place these ones. I put them in a pile and then untied them all and got to placing them. And I placed the entire pile of colored rubber bands until I was all out. And after that, I took it downstairs, which was a struggle, but I got it. And I weighed the ball in at 113 pounds. I then took it to the street to try to pick it up. And I can get it up to here, but it's too heavy to get over my head. So I just laid on it, like if you want me to keep on adding bands. So I'm now to rubber band ball part 41, and my 25 pounds of rubber bands got here. So I took it upstairs along with my giant rubber band ball. I took it all to the room where I placed the bands, and then I threw that in a package and opened it up. And each bag weighed 5 pounds. I dumped them all out, and the bands were pretty good. So I dumped out 10 pounds of bands and got to placing. And it was a lot, so I had my brother help me with this one. And we were going for so long, my phone even cut out because it ran out of storage. But we finished eventually and then took it downstairs. I got it all the way down and then weighed it in at 123 pounds. I took it outside and just look at it next to a wheel and next to my head. And here's my best effort at trying to pick it up. I can barely do it anymore. Let me know what else I should do with this ball. So one day I rolled my rubber band ball back upstairs because I'm now at part, 40 42. It weighs like 123 pounds, and I dumped out 3 more bags, which is like 15-ish pounds or something like that. And me and my brother got to placing them. And this was the most amount of bands I've ever placed, so we took a break and took it out to the snow. And I made a snowball, then threw it at it, and then rolled it around in the snow, rolled it over this hill, and then picked it up and dropped it. Then the next day I got back to placing, which was a huge pile that took me a long time to place, but I got it. And the ball was a bit deformed afterwards, but it's okay. It weighs like 139 pounds now, and just look at it next to my head. Like if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now to rubber band ball part 43, and I got another box of rubber bands. I dumped them out, and these bands are even thicker than the last ones. I then dumped out another bag and got to placing them. And it was way easier to place these bands because they're twice as thick, and I got a lot more done with less time. I finished it up, and then I took it all the way downstairs to weigh it, and it weighed in at 149 pounds. I then took it out to the street to try to pick it up, and just look at it next to my head. It's huge, and I couldn't pick it up. Like if you want me to keep on going. So one day it was rubber band ball part 44, and first I had to get the ball out of the zip line. I got it out, and then I had to carry it all the way upstairs. I made it up, and then I took it to the room where I placed all my bands and got to place them. I placed the entire pile of like 15 pounds of rubber bands for quite a while until I was done, and I carried it all the way downstairs and weighed it in at like 164 pounds. Then I took it out to the street and just look at it. It's massive. Can't pick it up. I just can kick it. Like if you want me to keep on going.